Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to our daily Hindu analysis. Before we begin, don't forget, tonight at 8 p.m. we shall be having our third strategy session under the Target Prelims 2023 crash course. Tonight, Sham sir will be discussing how to prepare for Indian economy in under 90 days for the upcoming prelims. Do join the session live, attend without fail so that you can chart out a plan to prepare for the upcoming prelims. And also don't forget to subscribe to our Telegram channel because immediately after the Hindu analysis, we shall have a quiz on all the topics that we are going to discuss. That will help you revise these topics and thoroughly prepare for the upcoming exams. So let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at the topics that we are going to cover today. We shall have a detailed discussion on 4 important articles in today's newspaper. There are a few editorials and columns, and there are a few other articles as well. So in total, I have selected 4 important articles for a thorough, comprehensive discussion. We have to thoroughly analyze these topics. And we have a set of smaller topics as well, which are more relevant for your prelims. So a total of 8 topics have to be covered, and trust me, we'll have a very comprehensive discussion on all these articles. The whole idea is to ensure that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper. You can save your entire time just by attending these 1 hour, 10 minute sessions. The idea is to help you cover all these topics comprehensively for your prelims and mains. So if you're liking these initiatives, just support us by pressing that like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So let's get started with the first topic for today. We have a very, very big development with regard to polity. Yesterday, the Supreme Court of India has delivered a landmark judgment. One of the most important judgments the Supreme Court has delivered in the recent past. I'm sure some of you would be aware of this already. The Supreme Court has changed the process of appointment to the Election Commission of India. As you all know, the Election Commission of India is one of the key constitutional bodies. It plays a critical role in upholding the Indian democracy. The Election Commission of India is vested with the powers of superintendents and control over Indian elections. This crucial constitutional body is expected to be neutral, unbiased, in order to ensure that elections in India are free and fair. In order to ensure that the election authorities don't work in favor of any political party. To ensure that it functions independently to uphold the very foundation of Indian democracy. So with regard to appointment of Chief Election Commissioner and the Election Commissioners to the Election Commission of India, the Supreme Court has ruled that going forward, the President of India should appoint the Chief Election Commissioner and the Election Commissioners based on the recommendation of a panel of a high-powered committee which will include the Prime Minister of India, the Leader of Opposition, or if there is no leader of opposition, the leader of the single largest opposition party, and the Chief Justice of India. So henceforth, this panel, this high-powered committee will be vested with the powers to select the next Chief Election Commissioner and the Election Commissioners of India. The President is of course bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister. So it's not a discretionary power the President has when it comes to appointing the Chief Election Commissioner and the Election Commissioners. Previously, the appointment process was that the government had complete monopoly over the appointment of the Election Commissioners. Essentially, the Council of Ministers headed by the PM would recommend the names of Chief Election Commissioner and the Election Commissioners to the President of India, and the President was bound to follow the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. So until now, the government had a complete control. It had full control over the appointment process to the Election Commission of India. It was monopolized by the government. So this had often led to allegations that the Election Commission is not truly independent. There have been allegations, criticism against the Election Commission that its autonomy has been compromised because the appointment of the Chief Election Commissioner and the Election Commissioners was under the complete control of the government, the ruling party. Because the President was bound to appoint the names recommended by the Prime Minister and the president here is bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. This was the previous arrangement. Now the Supreme Court has carried out a major intervention. A 5-judge constitution bench has passed a unanimous ruling. This is also very important. All the 5 judges, they've all agreed, they have concurred, they had the same opinion, and in this unanimous majority judgment, the Supreme Court has provided for a new process for appointing election commissioners. The 5-judge bench, which was headed by Justice K.M. Joseph, has authored a landmark judgment. I'm going to discuss some of the key points that the Constitution bench has brought out. We'll look at the specific points raised by the judiciary. So the final ruling is that going forward, the president will appoint the election commissioners based on the recommendations of a panel, which will include the Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition or the leader of the single largest opposition party, and the Chief Justice of India. So this basically makes the appointment process of election commissioners quite similar to the appointment process of the director of the CBI. It provides for more transparency and accountability. Going forward, the government alone cannot decide regarding the appointment of election commissioners. This has to be done by the Prime Minister by consulting with the leader of the opposition and the Chief Justice of India. So the Supreme Court has passed this judgment with the hope of providing more independence and autonomy to this key constitutional body. Now this brings up the question of the composition, the role, the functions of Election Commission. What is its constitutional status? What is the previous composition of this body? What's the concern with regard to its independence and autonomy? And what points have been raised by the 5-judge constitution bench? And what are the critics saying about this judgment? So all these arguments have to be discussed. Now, if you look at Article 324 of the Indian Constitution, under Part 15, it is this chapter which deals with elections in India. There are 5 articles here, Article 324 to Article 329. Under Article 324, the Election Commission of India has been provided for. It has been vested with the powers of superintendence, direction and control of elections in the country. And the Election Commission has the authority to conduct the elections to the Parliament, to the state legislature, and as well as to the office of the President and Vice President of India. This is the jurisdiction of the Election Commission of India. Now this point is very important for your prelims. Election Commission conducts elections to the Parliament, to the state legislatures, to the office of the President and the Vice President. When it comes to local elections, they are handled by the state level election bodies. If you look at panchayats, municipal bodies, etc., the local elections are conducted by the respective state election commissions. But the Election Commission of India is vested with these powers, and Article 324 provides constitutional backing to this body. Now, if you look at its composition, today the body is headed by a Chief Election Commissioner, and there are 2 election commissioners appointed to assist the Chief Election Commissioner. This is the current composition. But Election Commission always didn't have this composition. In fact, for almost 4 decades, from 1950s to 1989, the Election Commission was a single member body. It was headed just by the Chief Election Commissioner. There was no election commissioners. Because see, the Constitution does not specify the exact powers of the Election Commission. It does not specify the composition, the appointment process. These matters have been left to the Parliament to decide. The Constitution has only said that this body, constitutional body, will have the powers of superintendence, direction and control over elections. It has mentioned that the President would be the appointing authority. But the exact powers, the role, the appointment process, the eligibility criteria, the process of removal, the terms of condition of the election commissioners has not been defined by the Constitution. It's been left to the Parliament, and accordingly Parliament has enacted the Representation of People Act, which defines the powers, the role of the Election Commission. It has even brought out the Election Commission Act that determines the composition and the appointment process of the Election Commission. So until 1989, there was just one Chief Election Commissioner appointed by the government. The government, the Prime Minister would recommend the name to the President, and the President was bound to appoint that individual as a Chief Election Commissioner. The trend has been that the government often refers the names of retired bureaucrats, usually retired IAS officers who have been working closely with the government. They are often appointed as Chief Election Commissioners. This has become a regular pattern. In 1989, a conflict came up between the then Rajiv Gandhi government and the then Chief Election Commissioner, Perry Shastri. The then Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. Perry Shastri, picked up a lot of differences and conflict with the then Rajiv Gandhi government, and this led the government of India to change the composition of the Election Commission. The official reason that was stated was that the voting age has been reduced from 21 years to 18 years, which means more young voters are getting added to the list, which means the task, the responsibility of the Election Commission was bound to increase. So to deal with the additional work, the government said, we are adding 2 election commissioners. So 2 election commissioners were added. But many experts point out that this was because of a tussle between the Rajiv Gandhi government and the then Chief Election Commissioner. The government was looking to curb the powers of the Election Commissioner. The Chief Election Commissioner, who had become the sole authority, was picking differences and had issues with the government. So worried about the future electoral prospects, the then ruling party brought out these changes, providing for 2 more additional election commissioners. This arrangement was very quickly revoked in 1990 by the next VP Singh coalition government, right? Immediately the Election Commission Act was amended again, and the election commissioners were removed, and Election Commission was reverted back to its previous position. It had only 1 Chief Election Commissioner again. But in 1993, the P.V. Narasimha Rao government again appointed 2 election commissioners and thus provided for the current composition of this constitutional body. Because in 1990, another election commissioner was appointed, T.N. Seshan, who was known for his fierce independence. He is seen as one of the legendary Chief Election Commissioners of India, who took on every party, every politician, every leader without any fear, without any concern. So T.N. Seshan's term became very controversial, led to a lot of differences between the Election Commission and the Government of India. So following this, in 1993, the then P.V. Narasimha Rao government added 2 more election commissioners again, thus providing for the current composition of the Election Commission. So this composition has remained since 1993, since the last 30 years. So you basically have 1 Chief Election Commissioner and 2 election commissioners to assist the Chief Election Commissioner. All 3 election commissioners have been given the same powers and emoluments as that of Supreme Court judge. Is that clear? This is to ensure the independence of the institution. If there are any differences amongst the election commissioners, then the decision is taken by majority. This has curbed the powers of the Chief Election Commissioner. It basically prevents the Chief Election Commissioner from becoming a supreme authority. Because the decision making here is by majority. If there are differences between the 3 election commissioners, the decisions are made through majority amongst the 3 election commissioners. Along with this, the term has been fixed. They have been given a term of 6 years or until they attain the age of 65 years, which is in line with the term of the Supreme Court judges. The same term has been extended to election commissioners as well. But when it comes to the removal process, when it comes to removing the election commissioners and the Chief Election Commissioner, there is a difference. The Chief Election Commissioner has been provided security of tenure. The Chief Election Commissioner has greater protection. Thus, he or she can exercise greater independence in their functioning because they can be removed only in the manner of removal of a Supreme Court judge. Basically, the Chief Election Commissioner cannot be removed easily. The Chief Election Commissioner does not work at the pleasure of the President. The government cannot remove the Chief Election Commissioner whenever it wants. The President can remove the Chief Election Commissioner only if a resolution has been passed by the Parliament through a special majority. That too only on the grounds of proved misbehavior or incapacity. This is similar to the manner in which a Supreme Court judge can be removed. This provides additional protection to the constitutional office and thus allows the institution and the commissioner to function independently without favoring the ruling party, without fearing the ruling party. Alright, this is extremely crucial because it provides for that independence, that protection to this important constitutional body that helps in preserving the independence of the election commission. Understood? Whereas the election commissioners, on the other hand, they don't enjoy the same protection. The election commissioners can be removed on the recommendation of the Chief Election Commissioner. Just on the basis of recommendation of Chief Election Commissioner, the President can remove the election commissioners. However, Chief Election Commissioner cannot be removed so easily. It requires a resolution passed to that effect by the Parliament with a special majority. Right? So this is often seen as one of the weaknesses with regard to the composition and the terms of the Election Commission of India. There are other shortcomings and flaws also that have been pointed out by various legal and constitutional experts. For example, the Constitution has not prescribed the criteria, the qualifications needed to become the election commissioners. The specific criteria has not been mentioned by the Constitution itself. Even the term of the members is not protected through the Constitution. The Constitution is not providing for this. It's been provided to the Election Commission Act. Alright? And the Constitution has not debarred the retiring election commissioners from further appointment by the government. This could probably become an incentive or a disincentive, where the election commissioners are eligible for future appointments. So those who are driven by the prospect of lucrative postings, they might start favoring the ruling party and in return get lucrative post-retirement jobs. So this could again compromise the independence and autonomy of the institution. So these constitutional protections and guarantees are not provided in the Constitution itself. These are some shortcomings, some flaws that experts have highlighted with regard to the composition of the Election Commission. But the biggest criticism was always against the appointment process. For such an important constitutional body, the appointment process had been completely vested with the government. The government had a full monopoly. Because the President was appointing the election commissioners, including the Chief Election Commissioner, based entirely on the advice of the Prime Minister. The President was bound here by the advice of the Council of Ministers. With regard to removal, the procedural safeguards which existed for the Chief Election Commissioner was not extended to election commissioners, as we just discussed. And the other problem is that the Election Commission has not been provided financial autonomy. It is not financially independent. It is dependent on the funds delegated by the government. It is not drawing funds directly from the Consolidated Fund of India. For example, if you look at Comptroller and Auditor General of India, the judiciary, they are financially independent institutions because they don't have to depend on the government for their budget. Right? They can directly draw funds from the Consolidated Fund of India. But Election Commission does not have this financial autonomy, and many fear that this could be misused by the ruling parties. By cutting off funds to the Election Commission, they can bring down the Election Commission to its knees, force the Election Commission to behave and conform to the wishes of the ruling party. This again is seen as a serious threat to the independence of the institution. So these are some critical flaws in the very structure of the Election Commission. This has been debated since many years, and recently a petition was filed at the Supreme Court led by few advocates, including Prashant Bhushan and other top advocates. They were pushing for a more transparent, accountable process with regard to appointment of election commissioners. So based on this petition, the Supreme Court has delivered this landmark verdict. It's a 5-judge bench which has come out with a verdict, and it's a majority judgment, it's a unanimous judgment. All the judges have had the same opinion, and they've passed this landmark judgment where the powers of the government has been taken away with regard to appointment of election commissioners and Chief Election Commissioner. So going forward, at least until the Parliament brings out a new law to overrule the judgment, the appointment of the Election Commission will be determined by a panel led by the Prime Minister, which also includes the Leader of the Opposition and the Chief Justice of India. The judiciary also has given itself a role in the appointment of the election commissioners. In this context, let's see what the father of the Indian Constitution had to say about the Election Commission and the appointment process. The chairperson of the drafting committee, right, who's often considered as the father of the Indian Constitution, was deeply concerned about the appointment of the Chief Election Commissioner. because Ambedkar knew very well that this is going to be a critical position. It's a key position which will uphold electoral democracy in the country, because Election Commission is vested with this immense responsibility of conducting free and fair elections, which is the bedrock, the foundation of a democratic state. So during the Constitutional Assembly debates, Dr. Ambedkar had said that the provisions related to the appointment process of Chief Election Commissioner was giving him a headache. This is the exact word that Ambedkar himself had used in the Constituent Assembly debates. It was giving him sleepless nights. Ambedkar was extremely concerned, deeply worried about what should be the appointment process for the Chief Election Commissioner, because Ambedkar knew the critical significance of this position. It had to be well protected to ensure the independence of this body. At the same time, the Chief Election Commission shouldn't become a supreme authority on his own. That checks and balance was also needed in the system. And Ambedkar was also mindful that the process shouldn't be too complicated, because that could affect the very administrative process of elections. In fact, during the Constituent Assembly debates, Dr. Ambedkar had said that if you compare with the American Constitution, in the American Constitution, appointment to such high constitutional offices is led by the president. The president can make the appointments, but however, the president does not have full discretionary powers. The appointments made by the administration is further subjected to checks and balances by the Senate or by the US Congress. Let's say the US President provides for the appointment of judges or to the Election Commission. Those appointments have to be passed. They have to be certified by the Senate and the Congress. So there's a system of checks and balance in the US. But Ambedkar said we can't directly import this model to India. It may not suit the Indian context, because even though the checks and balances are good, it might lead to unnecessary delays, thus derailing the process of elections itself. So finally, Ambedkar felt the best mechanism was to provide constitutional status and autonomy to the Election Commission, whatever autonomy was possible, while allowing the Council of Ministers led by the Prime Minister to appoint the Chief Election Commissioner by recommending the name to the President of India. This was seen as a balanced system in the Indian context, and that is what was provided in the Indian Constitution. But after the Constitution was adopted, a lot of problems came up, challenges came up, where allegations were present that the Election Commission was often biased towards the ruling party. There have been many criticisms where Election Commission has become supreme. Under Election Commissioners such as T.N. Seshan, Peri Shastri, there have been criticisms that one individual has become so powerful that he could basically control the Indian elections and the Indian democracy, subverting the basic rights of the political parties and the ruling party itself. So there have been arguments on both the sides. That is why this is a very crucial issue, and now the Supreme Court has passed a landmark judgment. In this unanimous judgment, the judgment which was authored by Justice K.M. Joseph, he has pointed out that it's very important for the Election Commission to remain fiercely independent and neutral. It has to be honest, or else it is going to destroy the foundation of democracy in the country. This is what our constitution makers have envisaged. So in order to end the government's monopoly in the appointment process and its exclusive control, the Supreme Court has provided for this ruling. This is the rationale used by the 5-judge constitution bench to justify the order. So going forward, this high-powered panel, including the Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition, and the Chief Justice, they will decide the names of the Chief Election Commissioner and the Election Commissioners, recommend the names to the President, and the President is bound to appoint them. So this new process which has been laid out by the Supreme Court will continue unless and until the Parliament brings out a new law to overrule this judgment, to replace this appointment process. According to the Supreme Court, this will bring in more transparency, more accountability. It will help in making the Election Commission truly independent, and the election commissioners need not fear the government. The election commissioners, they can function freely, independently, by keeping the best wishes of the nation in mind, by working towards strengthening democracy in the country instead of being obligated to favor the ruling party or few politicians. Justice K.M. Joseph has said that Election Commission requires honest, independent commissioners. They should be able to distinguish the right from wrong in the process of conducting elections. While exercising superintendence over elections, a lot of complicated issues and challenges will come up. There could be violations of the Model Code of Conduct. There could be political leaders, politicians, ministers who could be breaking the electoral norms. So Election Commission will be expected to act fiercely, independently, without favoring any party, keeping the best interests of Indian democracy in mind to ensure free and fair elections in the country. To ensure this happens, you need righteous election commissioners who know how to distinguish the right from the wrong, who have the courage, the guts to take on the powerful, the most mighty ministers and leaders as well. Even if it's the Prime Minister, Home Minister, without any fear, the election commissioners should be able to act against them. They won't be able to do this unless and until the body is truly autonomous and independent from government control. This is the justification the Supreme Court has given. Justice Joseph, in fact, has given a very, very important statement, a very interesting statement. He has written in the judgment that the power to vote is more potent than the most powerful gun. Honestly, there cannot be a truer statement. The power to vote, your right to vote, the power to exercise your franchise is much more powerful than the most powerful gun that is available. That being the case, it is extremely crucial to protect the process of elections. It's extremely crucial to ensure the independence, the autonomy of this institution, which is responsible for conducting those elections. So that is why the Supreme Court has decided to step in to protect the purity of the election process. The Supreme Court has even suggested that Election Commission should not be weak-kneed. It should not bend before the government. It need not make any favors to the ruling party. It should function freely and fairly, and that is why the appointment process has to be changed. Government cannot have a monopoly here. It can't have exclusive control over who becomes the election commissioner of the Election Commission. The Supreme Court has made a direct link here. The Supreme Court has observed that the very heart of democracy is connected to this issue. Because political parties, since they have a insatiable quest, they're constantly pursuing power, they constantly want to win elections, they will not hesitate to subvert the Election Commission. Right? Not just the current ruling party, any ruling party could do it. There have been previous instances. Political parties are driven by their hunger for power. They might do anything in this regard, which even includes the subversion of the Election Commission, forcing the election commissioners to abide by the ruling party, favor the ruling party in the elections. This could compromise the very integrity of the elections. That is why the Supreme Court has taken away this monopoly from the government, and it has provided for a high-powered panel, including the PM, Leader of Opposition and Chief Justice of India, to decide on the future appointments to the Election Commission. In the judgment, the Supreme Court has also pointed out the lack of financial autonomy. However, here the Supreme Court has not directly intervened. It has urged the government and the parliament to immediately come out with a law so that the Election Commission need not be dependent on the government for funds. This is a request the Supreme Court has placed to the parliament and the government. It has asked them to bring out a law through which Election Commission Secretariat can draw funds from the Consolidated Fund of India directly, like the judiciary does, which will ensure its financial autonomy as well. Because as long as the Election Commission is financially dependent on the government can always cut off the finances, thereby forcing the election commissioners to behave according to the wishes of the ruling party. So to take away this fear of doubt and suspicion, the Supreme Court has recommended that complete financial autonomy should be granted, but the Supreme Court itself has not passed a ruling, it has not interfered here. It has urged the government and the parliament to step in to come out with a law so that it can be made financially independent. Now, with regard to the independence of the Election Commission, this appears to be a great judgment, a landmark judgment which could change the very face of elections in India, because it makes the Election Commission free from the government control. However, there is strong criticism which has come in as well. A lot of concerns have been raised about this judgment. Because through this judgment, the question is the Supreme Court carrying out judicial overreach? Is it stepping into the domain of the executive and the legislature? Is it overstepping its given jurisdiction, and is the judiciary undermining the government and the parliament and their powers? Alright, so this is the question which has been raised. And also the other point is that the Supreme Court preaches autonomy. It preaches transparency, accountability. But within the judiciary itself, there is no transparency and accountability because it keeps defending the collegium system. The Supreme Court even declared the NJAC as unconstitutional when the government and the parliament made an attempt to introduce transparency in the appointment process of the higher judiciary. Right? When the National Judicial Appointments Commission was set up through a constitutional amendment pushed by the parliament and the government, the Supreme Court struck it down to retain its collegium system, which is an opaque system of appointing judges. It's a system of judges appointing themselves. It is as opaque as the current process of appointing election commissioners, where the Prime Minister has the complete control in recommending the names to the President. So these questions have been raised. Is the Supreme Court carrying out judicial overreach? Isn't this hypocrisy on the part of the Supreme Court? Because within the judiciary, there is no transparency in the appointment process. The government is pushing for greater autonomy and greater transparency and accountability by providing a role for the government as well in the appointment process of the higher judiciary, but the Supreme Court is blocking these attempts. So on what grounds has the Supreme Court interfered with the election process? This hits at the very foundation of the Indian democracy. It raises many key constitutional questions, so you need to watch out for this topic. It's going to be a very, very important topic for Indian polity, both for prelims and mains, and please watch this space for more discussions on this topic. I guarantee you there will be many more editorials, columns on this topic. We will take a look at them in the coming days. So I hope you've understood everything, all the key points that were needed. Now, let's move on to the next article from page number 10 related to international relations. In this article, the writer is examining India's position on the Russia-Ukraine war. He's examining the stand that India has taken in the conflict, the pressure we have faced from Western countries, and he also evaluates whether India has done the right thing by indirectly backing Russia in the war. So let's examine this in slight detail. Ever since the Russia-Ukraine war began, ever since Russia invaded Ukraine, which in itself was illegal, India has taken a consistent position on this conflict. We have remained very consistent with our policy. Right from day one, even when Russia was still mobilizing troops, India refused to directly intervene and we refused to condemn the aggression of Russia. Till date, not once has India condemned the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia. This has been a consistent position of India, keeping in mind the national interests of India. The writer says this is the right position. This is the right policy of the Modi government because it is designed to protect India's core national interests. Because please understand, international relations is all about protecting your self-interests. Yes, it might sound selfish, but that is how the world of geopolitics works. Sometimes you have to be concerned more about your country's interests than interfering in other regions, in others' business. When it comes to idealism versus realism in political science and international relations, sometimes, yes, idealism is good. It's good to have idealist policies where you believe in morality, ethics, values, principles. Right? It's good that your foreign policy is driven by certain ideals and principles. But at the same time, you cannot always be driven by idealism. Because if you're just driven by idealism, by morals, values, ethics, etc., you might end up compromising your national interests, your self-interests. There comes a point where you have to be more realistic, you have to be pragmatic. You have to look at your self-interest first compared to the interests of others. Even when human rights violations are happening, even when grave atrocities are happening, if you're not able to do anything directly, if you're not able to intervene, or if you're not in a position to do or contribute anything positive, it's always better to become realistic, become pragmatic, protect your core interests by sometimes sidelining your idealist principles. This is something every country follows in their foreign policy. Not just India, not just US or Russia. Every country is driven by their respective national interests, their self-interests. So India has the principle of strategic autonomy, which is the very bedrock of India's foreign policy. This is a principle we have firmly followed more or less since the days of Prime Minister Nehru. In fact, it was Prime Minister Nehru's biggest contribution to Indian foreign policy. The principle of strategic autonomy, where India follows an independent foreign policy which is suited to our national interests. We are not allies of anyone. We are not obligated to follow others' foreign policy. We maintain our independent stand which is suited to protect our interests. So India has managed to strike this fine balance between idealism and realism, right? So keeping this in mind, we took a very consistent neutral stand. India did not criticize Russia for the illegal invasion. We refused to follow the Western economic sanctions. We not only refused, we even bypassed the Western sanctions, and we have continued purchasing Russian discounted oil and gas. India has become one of the biggest buyers of Russia's discounted oil and gas, thereby indirectly funding the war. Indirectly, India, China, both are funding the Russian war in Ukraine, because over the last 1 year, we are the biggest buyers of Russian oil and gas, which is a critical source of revenue for the Russian government. That is why Western countries are extremely angry with India. They have raised issues with India, right? They have criticized India as well, because India, being a democratic country, is not supporting Western democracies against the autocratic policies of Putin and the Russian administration. Even at the United Nations, at all international organizations, multiple resolutions have been brought up to target and criticize Russia. But not once has India voted. We have always abstained from these votes. Since the last 1 year, we have abstained from all these votes consistently. So this is the consistent position we have taken on the Russia-Ukraine war. We have remained neutral. We have not criticized Russia, and indirectly we have backed Russia by bypassing the Western sanctions, by continuing to buy Russian oil and also even defense supplies from Russia. Now, if you look at this from the perspective of Western countries, they see this conflict as a conflict between democracies and autocracies. This is the Western perspective. The Americans in particular, they are looking at this as a make or break conflict, similar to the Cold War days, where it was an ideological conflict between democracy and communism. US and West European countries are looking at this again from the same perspective. They are presuming that all democratic countries have to support their position, because Russia is behaving like an autocratic nation, led by an autocratic leader. But this viewpoint is not shared by all democracies. This is something the Western countries don't understand. Is that clear? They expect India to be on their side because they see India as the world's largest and most vibrant democracy, right? They see that India has been closely aligned with Western countries in the last 20-30 years. We have become very close to US and European countries. So they automatically assumed that India will take a stand against Russia, India will criticize Russia, and India will join the Western countries in targeting Russia. They were flabbergasted, they were completely shaken when India took a different stand, when India refused to condemn Russia, and when India started backing Russia indirectly. Because they have a short-sighted vision. They are looking at this as a conflict between democracies and autocracies. But that is not the viewpoint of India. In fact, not just India, there are many other democracies which don't share the same opinion. Look at South Africa, for example. Look at Brazil, two of the largest democracies in Africa and Latin America. They have very, very important relations with Russia to protect. They have equally important relations with Western countries. So even they have taken a position similar to that of India. So it's not just India which is neutral in this conflict, which is consistent in its position and indirectly backing Russia. Even South Africa, Brazil have similar interests. They have very close ties with Russia. They are close to Western countries as well. Even they are taking a neutral position. Forget South Africa and Brazil. Look at close Western allies such as Israel and Turkey. Turkey is a NATO member. Yet Turkey has very important ties with Russia. So Turkey has been very hesitant to join the Western countries entirely in targeting Russia. Israel is a very close partner of the US and the European countries, and Israel is also hesitant because it does have important relations with Russia as well. So it's not just India which is a democracy and yet taking this stand on the conflict. There are other examples as well. And more importantly, we don't follow unilateral sanctions imposed by a group of countries. We are not obligated. If the sanctions were from the United Nations, then India would have happily followed the sanctions. We abide only by UN sanctions. We don't follow unilateral sanctions generally. Understood? we generally don't abide by unilateral sanctions imposed by one country or by a select group of countries targeting another country. For example, that's why we have bypassed the sanctions against Myanmar for many decades. Understood? Whereas we have followed the sanctions against North Korea as it is led by UN and FATF. There is a very rare instance where we have followed unilateral sanctions, that is Iran. When Iran was hit by sanctions again in 2018, for the first time India was forced by the US to follow the sanctions and to cut off oil trade with Iran. Other than this exception, we don't follow unilateral sanctions. This is an established policy of India. Because see, please understand, European countries, Western countries, they have this short sight. They think European problems are the world's problems. Here I'm quoting our Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, who pointed out that European problems are not the global problems. There are other problems affecting India and other countries. Because see, this conflict is firmly rooted in the Cold War divide. The Russia-Ukraine war is a byproduct of the European geopolitics. It has nothing to do with India. It's nothing to do with other parts of the world. Yes, it's a grave atrocity which has happened. Yes, Russia was committing an illegal invasion. It has violated the sovereignty of Ukraine. It has violated human rights. No doubt about it. But can India do something? Can India interfere and push Russia back? No. More importantly, we have very critical relations with Russia to protect. So keeping all these factors in mind, India has taken a consistent neutral position, which has been our stand since many, many years. Even during the Cold War, we had maintained a similar position. Right? It was only when US pushed India, became hostile to India, that is when we abandoned the non-alignment position and we aligned with Soviet Union. Right? So India is very clear. This is a European problem. This need not be India's problem. We'll not get involved with the conflict directly. We'll not target Russia. We have very important interests to protect with Russia. At the same time, we do want the war to end. India does not support the war. Please understand the difference here. We are not supporting the continuation of the war. We are not just getting involved in it. We don't want to weaken Russia. See, this brings up the debate between morality versus national interest, idealism versus realism. Here, Western countries are claiming this as a moral question. They are saying this is a moral duty of democracies to protect Ukraine and to target Russia. But let me point out the hypocrisy of Western countries. Western countries are only using this as an excuse. They don't care about Ukraine. They don't care about human rights. There are examples to prove that. They are using this as an excuse to push Russia, to target Russia and to weaken Russia. There is no doubt Russia has violated international law. It has definitely annexed Ukrainian territories. It has even violated human rights. No doubt about it. India knows this. That is why India has called for an immediate end to the war. We have even pointed out to Russia that sovereignty and integrity has to be respected. Alright? India has said this is not the time for war. Right? India has made those statements very clear. But the Western motivation is hypocritical. Their motivation is not human rights, not protecting democracy. Their true motivation is to target and weaken Russia, which is their geopolitical rival. In fact, this is what led to the war in the first place. It was Western countries' interference in Ukraine which pushed Russia to take these aggressive steps to invade the country. There are similar examples of Western countries violating international law. But who punished them? Who criticized them? Who imposed sanctions on them? No one. When US carried out an illegal invasion of Iraq in 2003 based on false intelligence, US and UK, they lied to the world that Saddam Hussein is building WMDs, weapons of mass destruction. This was an illegitimate war which was not approved by the UN. When Western countries invaded Libya, they broke the UN mandate. The UN had approved only the imposition of a no-fly zone in Libya to protect the protesters who were protesting against Gaddafi's dictatorship. But US, UK and France, they broke the UN mandate. They turned the no-fly zone mandate into a full-on invasion of Libya. Who punished US? Who criticized UK and France? Who imposed sanctions on them? No one. Israel is illegally occupying parts of Jerusalem and Syria's Golan Heights, which is also a violation of international law. But is Israel under similar sanctions? No. This is the hypocrisy that you see in international relations. So it's a debate of morality versus national interests. When it comes to national interests, any country would choose its national interests. For Western countries, it is their national interest to target Russia and weaken Russia. Fine, we understand the game. It is fine they are targeting Russia. It is their problem. But we don't want to get in the middle of this. We have other problems to focus upon. We have critical relations with Russia to protect. That is our national interest. Yes, we want the war to end. We want the suffering to come to an end. We want international rules to be upheld. But does not mean we should target Russia, because Russia has been a critical friend of India, a historical all-weather friend. It has always been supportive of India since 1950s. Even when India was non-aligned, Russia kept backing India, especially with the Kashmir conflict. Even with regard to our conflict with China, Russia had taken a neutral stand in 1962. Russia continued supporting our nuclear program and space program. Right? Russia protected India in 1971 when US threatened India during the liberation of Bangladesh war. Understood? US became hostile to India. It came to the protection of Pakistan. So it was Russia which helped India, the Soviet Union which helped India at that point of time. When India tested nuclear weapons, Russia was one of the few powers in the world which did not criticize India's nuclear tests. So India cannot abandon such a close friend. Russia has been a time-tested friend for India. It has been critical to modernize our armed forces. It has been supplying critical weapon platforms to India. From 1970s till date, Russia has been a major arms supplier. It is crucial for our energy security today. If it is providing reliable, cheap oil and gas, this is our national interest because it will bring down our import bill. Why should we go and spend more and hurt our economy for Western interests? If cheaper oil is available there, we'll go buy it. Doesn't matter who's selling it. That is how international relations work. That's exactly how Western countries work as well. They're simply using morality, human rights as an excuse to push their own geopolitical agenda. That is why India has understood this. India protects its own interests. We have not criticized Russia. We have remained neutral. We have abstained from all the votes because this also helps us give a leverage on China, because if we get into major issues with China, Russia could possibly help India. It could give us some influence, some leverage on China. Possibly Russia can put some kind of pressure on China since it has very good relations with China. Western countries will never be able to do this, right? Moreover, Russia is crucial for us to ensure the stability of the entire Eurasia region. West Asia, Central Asia, all these regions are crucial for India's national security. Russia plays a critical role in stabilizing the whole region, right? So for all these reasons, Russia is crucial for India. That is why we are taking this position. We are very realistic in this regard. We don't want to weaken Russia. At the same time, we don't wish the destruction of Ukraine. Understood? We don't wish Ukraine to be broken down. We want Ukraine's integrity, sovereignty to be protected. At the same time, we want an end to the war. We want a negotiated settlement. And we want the world to move on because the war is affecting the global economy. It has disrupted global supply chains, right? It has put a lot of stress on the global economy. We are staring at a recession. So India has other problems to focus upon. Climate change, the pandemic still hasn't come to an end, right? The economic impact. This is what we want to focus upon. We want an immediate end to the war. We are ready to push Russia, Ukraine to negotiate, but nothing beyond that. Will not support Western sanctions, will not vote against Russia because Russia is a time-tested friend of India. And this is the consistent position we have taken, and the writer praises the Indian government for remaining consistent. This is what you need to understand from this article. Next, we have a column from page number 10 related to South Asia and the challenges and the opportunities seen in the South Asia region. See, South Asia is our neighborhood. This is where India is located. Right? We have neighbors like Nepal, Bhutan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, etc. South Asia is considered as one of the most volatile regions in the world because it has seen a history of political instability, wars, conflicts, border disputes, ethnic wars and civil wars, and it's been even badly affected by disasters. It's become one of the most volatile regions in the world. Look at Pakistan. It has seen many military coups. It has constantly gone through political instability. Look at Nepal. Nepal has gone through a constitutional crisis. It has gone through a civil war. Look at Sri Lanka. It's gone through an ethnic conflict. Now it's facing a very serious economic crisis. So all across South Asia, you see such disturbances, political and economic and social disturbances. Communal divide is very strong. Radicalism, extremism is present. Terrorism is being state-sponsored in South Asia. So it's one of the most volatile regions, and today the region is becoming even more vulnerable because of the recent economic shocks that the South Asia region has seen. The pandemic has disrupted the global economy, right? The impact is still being felt. Then of course we have the Russia-Ukraine war, which has had a deeper economic impact. Most of our neighbors are facing a dire economic situation today. Sri Lanka's economy crashed last year. Pakistan's economy is on the brink of collapse. Bangladesh is also staring at an economic crisis. Nepal is constantly going through a political crisis from many years. Now this is not good news for India, right? Our development, our stability, our security will be compromised if our neighbors, if our neighboring countries are not stable. So our priority is to ensure political and economic stability in our neighborhood. So that is why the writer is arguing that the volatility in the region has hampered the development of South Asia. Human development in the field of education, healthcare, socio-economic progress has been compromised. Governance has been pushed back by several decades because of all these issues that affect the South Asia region. And of course, India, which is right at the center, takes the hit as well. That is why groupings like SAARC have become a failure. SAARC is the regional organization, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. But it has failed to achieve human development. It has failed to achieve economic integration and regional integration. Because the region is always hit by conflicts, wars, tensions, economic crisis, political, social crisis. The constant India-Pakistan tensions, constant effort of Pakistan to derail India at SAARC. All these factors have led SAARC to become a failed organization. So as a result, human development has been compromised, and that is why the writer is urging the South Asian countries to work together to take immediate policy action to invest in human capital, to focus on human resource, to focus on education, healthcare, infrastructure, job creation, so that the region can grow and thrive and stabilize together. Understood? See, the biggest strength of South Asia happens to be its people. Our people are the biggest asset. It's one of the most populous regions in the world, most populated regions in the world. This is our biggest strength. It's also our biggest weakness. That's why it's very true that your strength becomes your weakness quite often, right? It's rightly said that your strength becomes your weakness. Our biggest strength is our people, our human resource. But the problem is we are not efficiently utilizing our human resource because we have not invested enough in human capital. We have not provided the right education, right nutrition, right healthcare for our people. We have not uplifted our people out of poverty. So when you don't invest in human capital, when you don't solve the socio-economic challenges, how do you expect the region to thrive? How do you expect human development to happen? How do you expect your strength, that is your human resource, to become an asset to drive economic growth and progress? Today, the region enjoys a very high demographic dividend. Majority of the population is under the age of 24 years, and studies by World Bank has shown that 1 million youngsters will keep entering the labor market every month until 2030. Now, this is a tremendous asset for South Asia, and yet we are not tapping this asset because of the pressing challenges in education, nutrition, and healthcare. Millions of people are still under poverty. Basic education is still missing in most of the countries, including in India. Nutrition is lacking. Look at the statistics related to malnutrition amongst children. Look at the healthcare issues affecting women in South Asia, including in India. Yes, we have made a lot of progress, but the crisis, the conflicts, the internal divides, the instability is resetting everything. It's pushing back all the development that we have achieved. That is why the writer insists that South Asian countries led by India should focus on human development. They should invest more on human capital, invest on socio-economic schemes, carry out the right policy intervention to uplift people from poverty, create jobs, give right education, right nutrition, and the right healthcare. This is the focus of the article. Understood? I discussed this in detail because you can expect a question, a mains question in international relations or maybe even in Indian economy on South Asia region. You should have this basic insight into South Asia. Next, on page number 12, the Hindu carries a detailed article explaining the aftermath of Sri Lanka's economic crash. As we were discussing in the previous article, Sri Lanka's economy crashed last year because of the massive debt that Sri Lanka had taken. Its foreign debt had increased to $51 billion. This was complete wasteful expenditure by subsequent Sri Lankan governments, starting right from 2005, from the Mahinda Rajapaksa government, till the recent Gotabaya Rajapaksa government, especially the Rajapaksa brothers. They were primarily held responsible for destroying the Sri Lankan economy. Unnecessary borrowings, wasteful projects, foolish policies, and massive corruption within the government. All these reasons were responsible for the fall of Sri Lanka's domestic economy. There were external shocks as well, like the pandemic, the Easter Sunday bomb blasts, the Russia-Ukraine war. But primarily the internal problems is what brought down the Sri Lankan economy. The massive corruption within the Sri Lankan government, especially in the Rajapaksa government, and the huge loans that Sri Lanka had borrowed from international markets, from China, from India, from Japan. So all of this placed a lot of burden on Sri Lanka's forex reserves. Its forex reserves were depleted. It didn't have enough cash left to pay for the loans it had borrowed. Imports had to be curbed. Essential items became in short supply, thus leading to massive inflation. All right. So eventually the economy crashed. Sri Lanka was almost going bankrupt. It needed assistance from various countries, and India was one of them which stepped in. And we have given tremendous assistance to Sri Lanka in the last 1.5 years. We have provided at least $3.5 to $4 billion worth of assistance to the Sri Lankan economy. But this is not enough. Sri Lanka right now is desperately seeking a bailout package from the IMF. IMF is all set to provide a bailout package of around $2.9 billion. But any support from IMF is conditional. IMF does not do charity here. IMF pushes for economic reforms. For example, you have to provide for free markets. You have to withdraw subsidies. Right? You need to go for prudent economic policies as mandated by the IMF. You have to devalue your currency as well. Only then IMF will recognize the country and provide the bailout package which is necessary. Even the existing debt, it has to be guaranteed by the creditors, by the crediting nations. They should give a written financial assurance that we are going to take the responsibility for the debt. Without these changes, IMF will not provide the bailout package. So recently, India and Japan, two of the biggest creditors to Sri Lanka, they have given the written guarantee to IMF through the Paris Club. Through the Paris Club of Creditors, we have given a written assurance to IMF that we are guaranteeing Sri Lanka's debt. India, Japan have done that because we are two of the biggest loan providers or crediting nations to Sri Lanka. But China, which is the bigger creditor than India, Japan, has not given this written assurance as of now. So IMF's bailout package depends on this. India, Japan have given the assurance, but China also has to give a similar assurance. Right? So IMF is waiting for China's written assurance. The other point is Sri Lanka has to carry out reforms to tackle corruption, to tackle wasteful expenditure, to revoke all the populist schemes which led to the draining of the public exchequer. So that is why Sri Lanka has been forced to take some harsh measures. Today, Sri Lanka's economy is suffering immensely. Inflation is at 50%. This is massive inflation. It is runaway inflation. Such inflation hurts the poor people. The common man, they are suffering in Sri Lanka because basic essentials are unaffordable. Food and medicines have become unaffordable in the country, leading to massive protests, repeated protests in Sri Lanka. But there is no easy way out. Right now, there is a stable government at least in place. Rajapaksa brothers were driven out of power, and Ranil Wickremesinghe has formed a unity government, a national unity government. The focus of the government right now is to initiate those economic reforms to reduce corruption, to reduce the subsidies and populist schemes, carry out the reforms that IMF is asking. And they want assurance from China. India, Japan have already given the assurance. So Sri Lanka is desperately awaiting the IMF package. Hopefully this month, by March or April, Sri Lanka will be getting the IMF bailout package. So the economic crisis is still not over. It will take many, many years for Sri Lanka to rebuild itself. So going forward, Sri Lanka not only has to follow prudent political policies, but also economic policies. That is what you need to understand. Because the crisis has not only destabilized the country and the region, it has hurt the people of Sri Lanka. The people of Sri Lanka are suffering immensely. That is why they are protesting. Frequent protests and violent incidents are taking place. Understood? So this is the aftermath of Sri Lanka's massive economic crisis. Now we come to the last part of the discussion. We'll take a look at a few small prelims topics which are very important from the prelims point of view. We have this article on page number 6 that refers to few important articles in the Constitution. It refers to Article 32, Article 163 and Article 200. Let me explain the context and then let's see what these articles are all about. The Telangana government has approached the Supreme Court because the governor of the state has delayed providing his assent to bills that have been passed by the state legislature. Since last year, the Telangana legislature has passed few important bills. These are priorities for the Telangana government. But the governor of the state has not given his assent. The governor has withheld his assent as per the powers of Article 200. So the Telangana government, which was desperate, which was unhappy with what the governor was doing, it has approached the Supreme Court under the powers of Article 32. It has invoked the extraordinary jurisdiction of Supreme Court for constitutional remedies under Article 32, and it has sought the Supreme Court's intervention to push the governor to abide by provisions of Article 163, because the governor is bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers according to Article 163. This is the argument the Telangana government is making, that the bills have been passed by the legislature. Now the governor has a duty to give his assent, or he can even refer this to the president as well. But the governor is just withholding his assent, delaying the bills. That is why Telangana has approached the Supreme Court under provisions of Article 32. See, Article 163 and 200, what do they deal with? According to Article 163, governor of a state is bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. This is what you need to remember. Right? Governor has very limited discretionary powers. In most matters, he is bound by the aid and advice of Council of Ministers. But when it comes to granting his assent to a bill passed by the legislature, governor has some special powers under Article 200. According to Article 200, the governor can either give his assent, he can give his assent to the bill leading to the enactment of this law, or the governor can withhold the assent. He can withhold the assent. There is no time period here. He can delay the bill as long as he wants. He can return the bill to the legislature for a reconsideration. He can ask the House to reconsider the bill, to look at some provisions again. Or the governor also has the powers to recommend the bill to the president, to reserve the bill for the president's consideration if the bill is violating central laws. If the bill is in conflict with central laws and center's jurisdiction, then he can reserve the bill for the president as well. These are the powers of the governor. So the governor is sitting on these bills, withholding his assent. Telangana, which is unhappy with this, feels that the governor is not following the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. So Telangana is arguing that the governor is breaching Article 163. So it has approached the Supreme Court under Article 32, which provides the right to constitutional remedies. See, Article 32 provides for writ jurisdiction to the Supreme Court of India to enforce the fundamental rights. It is mainly focused on individual fundamental rights of the citizens. Right? All the fundamental rights, right to equality, right to liberty, etc., right to life. These are basic fundamental rights given to individual citizens, right, and the residents of the country. If these basic rights are violated, you can approach the Supreme Court directly under Article 32 and invoke the writs that Supreme Court can provide, such as habeas corpus, certiorari, prohibition, mandamus, and quo warranto. These are writs available to the Supreme Court. Similar writs are available to the High Court as well to protect individual fundamental rights. Now please take this as an exercise. Read more about the writs. Read more about habeas corpus, certiorari, prohibition, mandamus, and quo warranto. What kind of powers does the Supreme Court, High Court enjoy under the writ jurisdiction? Now, the right to constitutional remedies under Article 32, it is not just limited to individual rights. This even allows This even allows to invoke the extraordinary jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has an extraordinary jurisdiction here to issue writs to government authorities, government institutions who are inactive, who are misusing their powers. Is that clear? The Supreme Court has an extraordinary jurisdiction here which is available only to the Supreme Court. If a government authority is inactive, not taking the right decision at the right time, if they are misusing their authority, abusing their powers, or not taking the right decision and policy action and just remaining inactive, in such cases, the extraordinary jurisdiction of the Supreme Court can be invoked under Article 32. This is what Telangana government is pushing for. Under these powers of extraordinary jurisdiction, it's asking the Supreme Court to intervene and issue a direction to the governor to provide his assent to the bill, to abide by 163, that is, follow the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. That is the argument, and these are the key provisions you should be familiar with. Next, moving on, we have an image on page number 6. The Hindu carries this image. The image is basically depicting the Ashtamudi Lake in Kerala. The Ashtamudi Lake is very, very important with regard to geography and environment and ecology. It is depicting the annual festival of Kadavur Sri Mahadevar temple in the Kollam district of Kerala. Now let me help you understand why the Ashtamudi Lake is important. It's very important for your prelims from a geography and environment ecology point of view. The Ashtamudi Lake is located over here. You can see in the map. This is where it is located. Alright. It is one of the largest lakes in Kerala after the Vembanad Lake. This is the second largest lake. It's in the Kollam region, the Kollam district. And Ashtamudi in Malayalam basically refers to 8 braids. Because if you look at the topography of the lake, just observe the map here, you can see multiple branches in the lake. There are 8 specific branches which looks like the braiding of your hair. That's why it's called Ashtamudi, meaning 8 braids. It is popularly known for its tourism. Right? It's the gateway to the backwaters of Kerala, the extremely popular Alappe backwaters. This is where houseboats and tourism, backwater tourism flourishes. Right? So a lot of Indian tourists, foreign tourists come here. It's the driving force of the economy in this region. And also it's a critical wetland. It's one of the most important wetland ecosystems. It's a Ramsar site. It's been recognized as a wetland of international importance under the Ramsar Convention. It is home to a diverse set of flora and fauna. It has mangrove forests as well. The precious mangroves are present. It has very unique aquatic marine life. It is blessed with good biodiversity. Understood? It is home to a number of migratory birds. A lot of bird species. They find a habitat here. So as a result, it is crucial from an environment and biodiversity point of view. It is home to the mangroves, migratory birds, a lot of threatened species as well. And there is some historical significance attached with it also. Kollam, or historically it was known as Quilon, it finds historical references. For example, Ibn Battuta, the popular Moroccan traveler who traveled across the world, right? He visited India as well in the 14th century. He spent almost 2 decades, more than 2 decades in India. And he has written about this place called Quilon, or today's Kollam. He has mentioned that this is a port dating back to the Roman era. There are claims that it dates back to the Roman era. Because right next to Ashtamudi Lake, you have the Kollam port, the Quilon port of the historic times. It's a port city located on the right bank of the lake. Reportedly, this was a historical trading connection between the Indian civilization and the Roman Empire. And whether these claims are true or not, these claims have not been firmly established, but at least Ibn Battuta has clearly noted that Quilon port was a trade link with China. It was a very, very important trading link. It's one of the important ports of South India through which India-China trade was taking place during the medieval times. Understood? That is the historical significance of Ashtamudi Lake and the Kollam port. Now, we have an article on page number 14 referring to India-Italy relations. The Italian Prime Minister is in India to be the chief guest at the Raisina Dialogue, which is a premier diplomatic event in India organized by Observer Research Foundation along with the Ministry of External Affairs. This is the top diplomatic event in India which brings together the leaders, diplomats, officials from around the world, and even experts and academicians to look at important foreign policy, geopolitical issues of the world. So Raisina Dialogue has been inaugurated and Italian Prime Minister was the chief guest. During this visit, India and Italy have taken forward their relations and they have signed few important agreements. Is that clear? Now this is a very big step because India-Italy relations had been very seriously compromised in the last few years. A few years back, let me tell you what happened. Italian Marines, Italian soldiers, they were stationed on commercial ships to tackle piracy in the Arabian Sea and in the Indian Ocean. While a ship was passing near Kerala in the Arabian Sea, these Italian soldiers, Italian Marines, they opened fire against a small boat which was approaching them because they assumed that it was a pirate attack. They were passing far away from piracy infested waters because piracy is seen near Horn of Africa in the Gulf of Aden. But Italian Marines were misled and falsely they assumed that those who were approaching the boat with the ship in the small boat were pirates and they opened fire. And they ended up killing Indian fishermen from Kerala. 2 Kerala fishermen were killed by Italian soldiers in the Arabian Sea, right next to the coast of Kerala. India claimed that this incident, this is called the Enrica Lexi incident. The ship involved was Enrica Lexi. On this ship, on Enrica Lexi, there were 2 Italian Marines who opened fire, assuming that pirates were approaching the ship, and they ended up killing 2 Indian fishermen. Now, India claimed that the incident happened in our territorial waters, which means we have full jurisdiction over the case according to UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. India said that the shooting happened within 12 nautical miles of our coastline, which is in our territorial waters where we have full jurisdiction as per the UN Convention on Law of Sea. So India arrested the Italian Marines, a high-profile case opened and a legal battle was fought at the Supreme Court. This completely derailed our relations with Italy because Italy protested this. Italy said the shooting happened in international waters where India will have no jurisdiction according to the UN clause. It turned into an ugly diplomatic battle as Italy was trying to defend the Italian Marines and trying to get their release from Indian custody. The case went on in the Supreme Court. Finally, Italy became hostile to India as well. It started voting against India at Nuclear Suppliers Group. It started blocking India's membership of NSG. It started voting against India at the United Nations. So that is how bad India-Italy relations became because of the Enrica Lexi incident. Finally, they both reached a diplomatic settlement. The Supreme Court released the Marines. They were tried under Italian courts. They have been released right now. Italy paid a huge compensation as well to the fishermen and their families who lost their lives. So finally, the matter was settled as per the provisions of UN clause by the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea. So this was the incident that happened a few years ago. Since then, our relations had not really improved. This had become a bad incident which had affected our ties. So now India and Italy are repairing the damage, and during this visit, we have signed an important agreement for defense cooperation. India and Italy are looking to step up their military exchanges. Through this defense agreement, they are planning to conduct military exercises going forward. They are looking to set up economic relations and a startup bridge to interlink their startups, to provide economic linkages between their startup companies, and also to promote defense exchanges and military exercises and joint training. So all these important initiatives have been announced, and Italy has said it is joining the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. Italy has agreed to join the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, which was proposed and established by India in 2019. In 2019, it was Prime Minister Modi who proposed the idea of such an initiative at the ASEAN and East Asia Summit, which was taking place in Thailand in 2019. During this ASEAN East Asia Summit, as part of India's Act East policy and as part of our Indo-Pacific vision and the Sagar Doctrine, India proposed the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative as a grouping of these regional countries and important powers of the Indo-Pacific to provide for stability in the Indo-Pacific region. This grouping, it's an open global initiative, it's not a treaty. Any country can join. Not just Indo-Pacific countries, even other countries can join the initiative. It's led by India. It focuses on maritime security, ecology, maritime resources, disaster management, trade, connectivity, etc. This is the priority of the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. It's led by India, and Italy has agreed to join this initiative. Alright, so these are the important developments you should be familiar with. Now coming to the last topic from environment ecology. Today, the 3rd of March, is the World Wildlife Day. It's very, very important for your prelims. World Wildlife Day is marked and celebrated around the world. So you should understand why, what's the significance. See, this proposal was adopted in 2013 by the UN General Assembly. Because on this day, in 1973, the CITES Convention was adopted. The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna. Alright, this is a very important convention with regard to protecting biodiversity, with regard to restricting and preventing the trade of endangered species of animals, birds, plants, etc. Understood? So this day on which the convention was adopted, the CITES Convention was adopted, is marked as the World Wildlife Day since 2013, when the UNGA adopted this day as the World Wildlife Day. It helps in highlighting awareness, spreading awareness about protecting and conserving our flora and fauna. The CITES Convention is one of the most important environment-related conventions, very important for your prelims. It was actually conceptualized in 1963 by the IUCN, by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. It was envisioned as a convention, a global convention, through which the export and import of endangered species and their material, their products can be regulated and prohibited. The idea was to prohibit the trade of endangered species in certain categories, regulate the trade in certain categories, thereby protect animals, birds, plant species, etc. So this convention was brought out in 1973, and finally it was adopted in the year 1975. Accordingly, the provisions have been adopted by various countries. More than 180 UN members have adopted it, and today it is the leading convention to protect biodiversity, one of the most important conventions. Alright, so to protect the animal species and the various flora and fauna, there are 3 appendices under the CITES Convention. You have Appendix 1, 2 and 3. Appendix 1 has the highest degree of protection. The flora fauna listed under Appendix 1, they get the highest degree of protection because the trade of these species and their specimens is completely prohibited. The flora fauna which are facing the risk of extinction, which are threatened by hunting, poaching and wildlife trafficking, they are listed here for the highest degree of protection. The international trade is completely prohibited with regard to Appendix 1 species such as Asiatic lions, gorillas, tigers, sea turtles, etc. The most threatened species are listed here. Trade in their wildlife products, in their specimens, is completely prohibited. If at all trade has to be done in Appendix 1, you need special permits. Special permits are needed to carry out trade in the specimens of these wildlife species. That is how the strictest regulation has been implemented. The highest protection has been provided to these species listed under Appendix 1. Then under Appendix 2, international trade is regulated. It is not prohibited. The species listed under Appendix 1, they can be traded commercially, but you need a license, you need a permit. The trade is allowed but without threatening the species. It is very well monitored, it is regulated trade. Usually for research purposes, for some commercial reasons, trade of species is allowed but it is very tightly regulated. And finally under Appendix 3, certain species which are protected in one or more countries, they can seek regional regulations on the trade of these species. Regional trade restrictions can be placed on these species and their specimens. That is where Appendix 3 comes in. Alright, so under these 3 appendices, all the flora fauna have been listed, according them different degrees of protection. This is what you need to know about the CITES Convention. Understood? It's a very, very important topic for your prelims. So with this, I bring my discussion to an end. I hope it was a good, productive session. As I've been saying, these 10-15 minutes of extra discussion is very good. Trust me, it's worth it. I see a lot of comments that session is getting extended. But if you have to cover newspaper thoroughly, if you don't want to go back and read the newspaper, the 15 minutes, trust me, it's worth it. Just spend that little extra time with me. I'll help you cover all these topics in complete detail. So take up these mains questions for your answer writing practice. And don't forget to head to our Telegram channel for the quiz so you can revise all these topics that we have discussed. So I hope everything is clear. I hope we have covered every topic in detail today. Do let me know how the session went in your comments and do subscribe to our channel. So that is it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.